Welcome to another episode of Eberhart Outdoors. This one's going to be about a buck I shot on October 15th. I shot him in the morning. And before I talk about that, I just wanted to say a week or so ago, I went down to some public land and met the guys from the tethered bus tour, the tagged out bus tour. And they had a great time. Andy May was there. His daughter Sienna was there. She had shot a 9-point during the youth season in Michigan, and the boys gave me a tagged out hat and for the bus tour, and the bus was really cool. I was really impressed. Shocked there hasn't been a fight yet with 5 testosterone-laden young men, but I had Dallas sign my hat, Spoonie, Caden, and Grayson, and the other one we had to take off and go to a funeral. So, and I also got Sienna May's signature on my hat too. So I'm going to wear this proudly. And they also gave me the t-shirt. So it was pretty cool. I don't really know how they've done yet. I know one of them shot a doe. He was actually skinning it out and shot it on some private property. I don't think they did well on the public land though. That was good time. I had a lot of fun with those guys, messing around with those guys. That was actually pretty cool. But on October 15th, I shot a pretty nice 8-point for Northern Michigan. He was a stud, at least 3 years old. I think he was a 3-year-old. 8-point. Rattled him in. Rattled him in the morning. That's only the second morning I've hunted all season. I love hunting mornings. Stuff just hasn't worked out for me work-wise to be able to hunt in the mornings. I've had to work. So I rattled him in out of a cornfield. There was about a 40-yard buffer between standing corn and a big cattail swamp marsh with marsh grass and bogs in it. And rattled him out of the corn. He came in to about, I'd say, I don't know, 9 to 12 yards, someplace in there. And when I shot, I actually couldn't see the arrow hit him, but it made a loud whack. So I knew I was on the shoulder. So I was hoping like heck I didn't hit the knuckle, but I was pretty sure I didn't because it was a different thwack. It sounded like it went through a blade. So I thought it went through a shoulder blade. But to be safe, I backed out. I left and came back at 1 o'clock, and he'd went maybe 120 yards max, and I shot him with a G5 3-blade 100-grain striker, which did the job. I'm only shooting 40 pounds. I'm shooting a Matthews bow at 40 pounds and got full penetration. I've got 18 cameras out. This is the biggest buck I've got on camera, but I have to keep the reality in check. You know, where I live, this buck is a monster buck, yet if this was in Iowa or in Missouri or in Kansas, I wouldn't even think about lifting my bow off the hook. So everything has to be put in perspective. When you're hunting, you have to take the area you're hunting, the amount of pressure that the area is receiving, how many bucks live to be 3.5 years old because there's so much gun pressure and hunting pressure. And I'm in an area with sandy soil, so the minerals don't grow big antlers. You have to take all that into consideration when you're setting your goals and your standards on what you want to shoot. And this is definitely a big buck for this area in northern Michigan. I've rattled 16 bucks in within shooting distance. Now, 3 times out of those 16, I rattled in a bachelor group came in. Don't worry about the cell phone. A bachelor group came in. So 3 different times. Once I rattled in 4. Another time I rattled in 4. And then another time I rattled in 3. And then 5 of the times I rattled in singles. And they were all most of them came out of standing corn. But one of them, where I rattled in 4 for a bachelor group of 4, that was in a swamp. So that was actually in a swamp, and I had also rattled in a single buck on that same exact hunt, and that was also a morning hunt. So both morning hunts I hunted. One time I rattled in 5 bucks, 4 in a bachelor group and a single. One was a pretty decent buck. So on the only 2 morning hunts I've hunted, I've rattled in a single in a bachelor group of 4, and then the next time I rattled in the one that I shot. And just about everything has been where there's a bur oaks, white oaks, next to corn. So every time when I've been next to corn, the bucks have came out of the corn. I've yet to have a buck come out of the security cover off the corn. And where I'm hunting where there is swamp or heavy security cover in the timber side as well as the standing corn, but they're bedding in the corn. The majority of the deer are bedding in the actual corn itself. I mean, that's as good a security cover as you can get. They have security cover, plus they can just stand up and eat. So, you know, it works on two separate counts. You know, it's got bedding area plus its food source. But anyway, I shot him. It came back at 1 o'clock. He didn't go very far. I did a video of him, which I'm going to show. It's pretty rare to find a standing cornfield along timber. If the timber has low enough branches along the edge, usually there's going to be scrapes along that perimeter. So when you see something like that, that's just a really good area to rattle, because there's an excellent chance you can rattle a buck in out of the corn, because there's scrapes there, and scrapes are hit by a lot of different bucks. So if they're bedded in the corn within earshot, you know, there's a decent chance that they might respond because they want to know what other bucks are in the area. You know, if it's a dominant buck, he wants to know if there's an intruder buck that has not sparred with yet. And that's something else. These are not blown out rattle sequences like you see on TV, you know, where they just bang antlers together. They don't really know what the heck they're doing, but they do have monster bucks and it's real competitive. So they still get responses. I'm just doing light sparring sequences. And I have a couple of videos out there already, maybe 1 or 2 back, that show the sequences that I've been doing to rattle bucks out. It's been kind of interesting because I've got a couple of Amish friends up in northern Michigan, a little farther north, and I told them about that. These are Amish that actually have cell phones. And the one guy, he's never shot a buck in his life. He rattled in a 4-point and in a swamp, and he shot it, and he was just geeked. And then I have another friend up in way northern Michigan, in Petoskey, and I told him about it one afternoon, and he called me up at like 3:40 that same afternoon. He had gotten into his tree and rattled, and he rattled in a 4-point. And then I've had a couple other people that have shot deer that rattled them in after I mentioned how good it's been this particular year. I always rattle. Every year I rattle. If I'm set up in an area where I got security cover all around me, like standing corn, button up to timber with security cover understory, or in a swamp, I always do a rattle sequence. And I told the guy, okay, you rattled this 4-point in, which you obviously didn't want to shoot because he's trying to kill a good buck. What did you learn from that? And he just was kind of like puzzled. And I said, well, you should have learned that you don't rattle 4 hours before dark, because the odds of a mature buck in a heavily pressured state and area like in Michigan, on a lot of the properties in Michigan, they're just not going to respond. You got if you're going to rattle in the mornings, you got to do it shortly after daybreak. And if you're going to do it in the evenings, you want to do it about 40 minutes before dark. So I said, so if you're trying to kill mature bucks, don't rattle so early, because you're making a sequence, and the more you do it, the less interesting it's going to be if there is a mature buck within earshot. So by doing that sequence at 3:40, if there was a mature buck within earshot and it didn't respond, and then he did another sequence or 2 later, that's going to lessen the odds of him coming. The less you do it, the more apt they're going to respond on that first 1 or 2 times. If you rattle every hour, you know, they're going to know that gig. That's not normal. You know, the deer don't stand in one spot for 4 hours and every hour do rattle sequences, you know, spar. So you got to keep it real. And so he understood what I meant after I told him. And I hope everybody gets to watch the video that I posted Thursday where I rattled in a buck. It was a 2.5-year-old, pretty wide, but he had real short points, typical Michigan deer, no antlers. He followed my entry route in perfectly. I mean, as soon as I videoed him coming out of the corn, came out of the corn, went down the edge a little bit until he hit my entry route, which there was an opening there because there's always a heavy brush along the edge of the corn. So he was going to go that way anyway until he hit the opening to come down to where I was. And as soon as he cut my track, he could smell the ground disruption. And the ground disruption, basically, he was scent checking. It took him quite a while to come the 40 yards to my tree, but he came within 5 yards of my tree. And I taped it all. It's all on film. And he stopped. There was a log he would have had to jump over. He sniffed the top of the log, and then he lost interest. And it was like, you know, if there would have been any human odor, he would have been gone as soon as he hit it when he was up by the cornfield. So this is just like those phony dog tests that you hear about all the time that people did with scent lock, where somebody was in scent lock and they walk through a field or something and hide out in the field, and then they let a dog go, and the dog finds the disruption route and follows it to the guide. That test means literally nothing. This deer did the exact same thing. He followed the ground disruption, because every time you put your foot down, if there's no odor on you whatsoever, you're still disrupting the ground, you're disrupting the earth, you're breaking grasses, and dogs and deer can smell that. So, you know, if there would have been human odor, he was smelling every little piece of vegetation, the ground, bushes, weeds, everything. He sniffed everything. He was even looking into trees. And he couldn't smell anything that related to human, and after a while, he just lost interest. And he started nipping some buds on this little bush off to the side, and eventually, and this is on film as well, he went over about another 8 or 10 yards and started rubbing on a popple sapling. And I videoed that too. Just totally lost interest. If there had been any human odor with a 2.5-year-old buck here, he'd have been gone. So that's proof positive, and that probably happens to me, 2 to 4 or 5 times a year. Usually it's a doe, a big mature doe. She'll follow the ground disruption 4 or 5 yards and then lose interest and then keep going the way she was going. But if they would smell any human odor, it'd be over. They'd just leave. But they're curious. They want to know what made that ground disruption, and when they can't figure it out, they just give up and go on about their business the way they were going. So I just get miffed with all these people. Well, there's dog tests and there's this test. I guarantee you, if I did my scent lock regiment and I set up a dog test the way I wanted a dog test to make it replicate deer hunting, dog would not, no way, dog would not win me. Wouldn't happen. I'll take anybody up on that one, by the way. My son did it. My son did it in Germany about 15 years ago with a cameraman. And that was on pigs and roe deer. He did it for a TV show, and he died a year and a half ago, and I do not know where that video is. But he had it on video. And it was really interesting. And he wouldn't give me the video, and now I have no clue where it is. But anyway, I hope you enjoy this. It's going to be a short video on the recovery, putting it into my van, and 72 years old and still out there throwing sticks with a 40-pound bow, and that's as low as I can go. That's the state limit. So if my shoulders get any worse, I don't even want to think what I'll have to do. But anyway, it is what it is. So hey, take care and good luck the rest of the season. Well, it's October 15th, and this is the 16th buck that I've rattled in, either out of standing corn, which most of them were, or in a swamp. And this one I rattled in this morning, early in the morning, like I think I shot him at like 20 after 7. Basically, I did a rattle sequence as soon as I could see good enough to shoot, and he came in about 15 minutes later looking, and he came out of the corn. Also, last night I was in a different spot downstate, and I rattled in 4 different bucks, and I did a video on that to just prove to all the naysayers that scent lock works. Because I had a 2.5-year-old buck for 20 minutes scrutinizing my entry route. He sniffed every bush, every branch, every twig, every piece of vegetation, the ground, trying to find out what was making the ground disruption. And if he would have smelled any human odor, he'd have been out of there. He came within 5 yards of my tree. But I videoed him coming out of the corn, coming through the edge, which is where I came through, and he was on my trail, followed me all the way to the tree, and it took him about 20 minutes. He was looking in trees, but he couldn't smell any human odor or he would have bolted. So that was proof positive, and that happens occasionally. But anyway, this one here is a beautiful 8-point. I'm in central Michigan. That one was down south last night. I came home, hunted this morning. He came right in out of the corn. Shot him right through the top of the heart. And it's just, for central Michigan, this is a really, really nice buck. Finally. All those bucks I've rattled. And this one here is the same buck I rattled in maybe a week or so ago. I don't know, it was the 3rd or 4th of October. I have him on camera. I actually did a video showing him on a scrape. I rattled him into 5 yards. And I didn't take the shot. I drew on him twice and I didn't shoot him. And he was just standing there. I don't know why, because I've got like 18 cameras out, and this is the biggest buck I have on camera, and I've had him out since mid-August, or mid-September. So this is the biggest buck, and I'm like, you know what, John? This is as good as they've got here where I'm at, so on the property that I'm hunting. So I decided to try and get him, and I took him this morning. Perfectly symmetrical 8-point, and that's about all I got. Got him loaded in the otter sled, and gonna drag this bad boy out of the swamp. And I'll tell you what, on all this boggy stuff, it's not fun because this thing wants to tip sideways. Sled. Probably shouldn't even have brought the sled. Would have been probably easier just dragging it on its fur, but we'll find out. Okay, here's the buck getting ready to slide it up into my minivan. Got all my boots and bow cases and totes here. I'll throw my cart on top of it. But got the ramp there that my son made me for my van. And he's in an otter sled, 28 by 54. In case anybody's wanting to know, 28 wide, 54 long. Fits deer perfectly. So I think it's a mid-size otter cart. Way better than a jet sled. Jet sleds are roto-molded, so the corners are very weak. They wear holes in them really easy. Otter sled is the same thickness of plastic all the way throughout the corners. So when I'm loading stuff into my minivan, I obviously don't want holes in the corners because then blood seeps out and my carpet gets bloody. I've worn through 3 jet sleds over the years, and I've had this otter sled for probably 10 years, and it isn't even starting to wear. So otter sled if you're looking for a sled. But if you have a minivan, you got to make your own ramp. I don't think they make them for that. My son John made that. The cart over there with the angled tires, Versacart, hands down the best cart for dragging deer, getting deer out of the woods on wheels. The wheels are angled out to the side, so you can actually go over logs and mounds without the deer tipping over. Anything where the wheels are straight and the carcass is up above the axle, when you go over any side hill, the whole thing wants to tip to the side. With this, it doesn't because the angles are tired. The tires are angled, so it makes up for the hump you go over. Anyway, there he is. Nice, clean, symmetrical 8-point. If interested, the links to many of the podcasts I've been on, or for information about my 2-day whitetail workshops that take place in March and April, please visit my website at deer-john.net. Thank you for watching another episode of Eberhart Outdoors, and to receive notifications for future videos, please subscribe.